Well, this morning I thought I would break from our Sermon on the Mount series and just bring a Father's Day message to you. I was hoping to have a few more fathers here today, but
No roses?
no roses. Julie actually asked me, "What should we do for the fathers?" She goes, "Maybe I should make them biscuits and gravy this morning." And I told her that would have been fine, but that was around 11 o'clock last night that she said that. So, just to the fathers that are here, I do want to wish you all a very happy Father's Day with many, many more to come. A small boy once said, "Father's Day is just like Mother's Day, except you don't spend as much on the gift." Mark Twain even said, "When I was a boy of about 14, my father was so ignorant I could hardly stand to be around the old man. But when I got to the age of 21, I was astonished at just how much the old man had learned in 7 years." Dads are famous for sayings, aren't they? We call my dad sayings Marvinisms. I mean, we've always said we were going to write a book of the Marvinisms. But I thought I'd throw out some of the dad sayings that I think all of us can relate to. One of the favorite ones were, before you get a spanking, when they say, "This is going to hurt me far more than it hurts you." Yeah, I never did believe that one. Next one was, "Make sure you bring me back all the change." And then, "Well, how should I know? Ask your mother." "What, do you think I'm made out of money?" "Quit playing with your food. Be quiet. Can't you see I'm trying to think?" "Why? Because I said so." Now you just wait till you have kids of your own someday. And this was always Stuart's favorite one. "I wasn't sleeping. I was just resting my eyes." I'm sure each of us could add quite a few to that list, but we know that being a parent can be an interesting and trying experience, and being a father has its own challenges as well. Someone once said, "Parents spend the first part of the child's life urging them to talk and walk, and the rest of their childhood telling them just to sit down and shut up." On another occasion, a father said to his daughter, "Well, what's wrong, Judy? Usually you talk on the phone for hours. This time you only talk for 30 minutes. How come?" And Judy replied, "I got a wrong number." Like I said, parenting and fatherhood can be a real trial, but at times it can be a true blessing as well. And we're here to remember the Lord as our Father in heaven, as well as our earthly fathers, and to honor both of them today. And so today I want us to think about a few of the things, at least 3 specific things for which we should always say thank you, Dad. And the very first one that I came up with was thanking them for our daily provisions, providing for us. In 1 Timothy, it says, "If anyone does not provide for his relatives, especially for members of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever." Whew. That's pretty much in our face, isn't it? If a father doesn't provide materially for his family, like food, shelter, clothing, and whatnot, then he has denied the faith of Christ and is worse than the unbeliever. And you may ask yourself, why would he be worse than an unbeliever? Because even unbelievers provide for their families. As a child, I really can't remember a time where my needs were not met. Except for a couple years ago, I don't remember my dad not being a pastor except for just a few years in his lifetime. Back in the day, when my dad started out as a pastor, pastors didn't make very much money, believe me. I was told by him that his first pastoral position made $125 a month, plus the use of the parsonage. Now, we had a family of 3 children, and even in the early 1960s, $125 a month didn't go that far. But that's why my mom always worked as well. And it wasn't, in fact, till I was 16 when we even owned any type of home ourselves. And it was a condominium that they bought up in the Auburn area. But all the years of eating breakfast for dinner, Spam with diced potatoes, onions, and bell peppers, and my mom's famous spaghetti with pink sauce. Pink sauce is spaghetti sauce with water and ketchup mixed in to make the spaghetti sauce go just a little bit further. I can't ever remember going without food or clothing, ever. I really don't ever remember missing out on anything. See, if you don't have a lot, then you don't know any better. Now, to my parents' advantage, my grandpa and grandma had done well for themselves in chicken ranching and in the feed industry. So we were never without eggs. We were never without chicken. And Grandpa would always butcher a side of beef every year from one of the ranches that he had. And he'd always share half of it with us because by the time I was a young kid, my dad's sister had already passed away from her second childbirth. So my dad was, in essence, their only child left. And they made sure that if they bought something, they always bought two of them. They bought one for themselves, and they would buy one for our family to where we wouldn't be without. I remember, though, with the story of eggs, we were never, ever, ever without eggs. We grew up on eggs. If you were a Decker and you didn't like eggs, you were adopted out. I didn't know till I was probably 5 or 6 years old that all eggs did not come with two yolks, because the double yolks on the ranch never went to market. And so those would be the ones that we would get all the time. And I was at my friend's house, and she said, "Would you like some eggs for breakfast?" I said, "Sure." She goes, "How many would you like?" I said, "2," thinking 4 yolks. And I get this, and I see 2 yolks. And I'm like, what's wrong? It wasn't until then, I realized that all eggs did not come that way. But what about your father? I could sit here and tell story after story of my father or my grandfather. I'd like to have a couple of you just share a story or two about how your parent provided for you this morning. Anybody here would like to share? Carol?
I think I grew up a lot like you did. We kind of pinched and pulled, and even when he was teaching, he didn't get a lot of money. And we never knew we were without anything. It was always there. My mother always cooked enough food that we were perfectly happy.
Mm-hmm.
And he was always there for us. He never left us alone, and he always helped us out. And we knew he loved us. We had no problem with that at all.
Yeah. Did he make a lasting impression upon you?
Yeah.
Not just upon your backside when you got in trouble. Exactly.
He never raised his hand, but if his ears turned red, we backed off.
Yep. Anybody else here this morning would like to offer up a story? Charlotte?
I ditto all of that Carol just said. My dad was a hard worker. He was a ranch foreman,
Mm-hmm.
ran a ranch, and life was just perfect as far as we were concerned. We had everything we needed, you know. If there was something else, we didn't know about it, so we were very satisfied. Always felt loved, always felt protected. We never had to worry because the lights were, PG&E wasn't paid, or the water wasn't, we never had any of that. He was a very good provider. He made things for us, you know, I can remember he made a doll bed that was especially neat, and a little dresser for me and he sneaked to his wood shop and did that at his wood shop and then was a surprise for Christmas. He was a very strict father. I didn't get to do a lot of the things that other kids got to do,
Mm-hmm.
but after I grew up, I was very glad that do those things. He was a good protector. He was a World War II vet. We grew up loving our country, respecting our flag. He was just a very good parent.
Awesome. Well, I'm sitting here today to tell you, if your father provided for your needs, you need to make sure that if he's still alive, to thank him. But I don't know if any of our fathers are alive still here today. But at least say a prayer, thanking the Lord that you had such a good father. The second thing I came up with that a father needs to do is to give faithful instruction. Be thankful when they give you faithful instruction. Ephesians 6:4 says, "Fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord." At times we as fathers, we can harp, oh, you're not doing it right, make sure this is over here. I could definitely see that with Bob. Well, that is a 132nd of an inch out of square. It can be tough sometimes because we try to hold our children to our standards, and sometimes our standards can be a little rigid. But we need to know that fathers instruct their children about many, many things, either hands-on or just by them seeing what they're doing. My dad used to say to me, "Well, son, if everybody was jumping off a cliff, would you jump with them?" Mom has heard that one before. Little did I know that when he instructed me in that saying right there, that he was teaching me Romans 12:2. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by it. Fathers have given all kinds of instructions to the children about such things as school, work, relationships, dating, driving a car, etc. I also remember another occasion when as a boy of 10, I was wanting to do something. We lived up in Arcata and I was bored to death. I was bored to death. So I asked my dad if I could apply for a paper route. And he lamented and said, "Sure." First thing he said to me, "Son, you sure you want to do this? Because you have the rest of your life to work." Boy, did I. He was right there. But he says, if you truly want to do it, yeah, go ahead and apply for a paper route. So I did. And I got to throw papers up in Arcata around our house that we lived. Our house was in the area of Humboldt State College, so I also got to deliver to students and faculty that lived on campus at Humboldt State College. And back in those days, the paper route guy or girl that threw the paper would also be responsible for collecting the money. They didn't have online payment like they do now. And so they would send you a list of the people that you would have to collect from and how much you would collect from and then how much you would have to send in. And so I did my first due diligence. I went out and I collected from each and every one of them, got the money, counted it up, and I looked at how much money I was supposed to send in, and I was horrified because I had more money than I was supposed to send the newspaper. So I counted it again, and I got the same figure. And I counted it 3 or 4 times. And finally, out of fear, and knowing that dads know everything, okay, dads are instructional, dads know everything, I went to my dad and I said, "Dad, I don't know what I did wrong. I don't know who I collected too much money from, but I swear I collected this amount of money from each and every person, and I have money left over from what they say I'm supposed to give to them." And my dad looked at me and goes, "Well, son, that extra money is what you earn for throwing the newspapers. It's your labor." I looked at it and I said, "I get paid for doing this?" I had absolutely no idea. But being a father who was also a pastor, he then also made sure that he went on to teach me the value and the lesson of tithing. And he said, "Now you just need to make sure that you set aside 10% of that each and every month to give to the church." And so he was teaching me. At the age of 10, he was instructing me, not just in the ways of the world, but also in the ways of the Lord. And I wanted to open it up again here today to see who here might have a story about your dad that in his instruction of how he instructed you in some of the things in life. Artie?
A lot of times, he didn't really tell us what to do or how to do it. He let us do it, and then after it was done, then he'd say, well, what could you have done? And he was a person that would help anyone and everyone, regardless time, day or night.
That's awesome. Anybody else this morning?
That's a quality, a good quality of fathers. I know they hold their babies differently than the mothers do. They hold them facing out to the world rather than from them close to their chest. My father, well, this doesn't connect here, but he was in the Air Force. He was a tech sergeant in a frozen career field,
Mm-hmm.
administrative field. That aside, but I remember him telling me when I was very young, crying about something. He just stood there and said, don't cry about the little things. And I was hurting, but I never forgot that. And it does make sense today not to fret about it. Don't sweat the small stuff.
Don't sweat the small stuff. Could be another one of those sayings that we all put down.
And he was funny, humorous. And he would say things sometimes with a rhythm and a funny way. Don't think too much, it might hurt you. And that would be very lyrical sounding. He had a friend. Usually his friends were younger than him in the service, but that friend had a saying, what man can do, coal can do, or something. I don't know, there were just phrases. And he was, before I graduated from high school, he was kind of strong about the idea of enthusiasm. Yeah, he believed that he thought that was a good quality to possess, enthusiasm. And that along with the ability to be a good salesperson. And he did go to recruiting school, though he never became a recruiter, but he was enthusiastic about being enthusiastic.
Well, I see where you get it, because you have a tendency to look at the brighter side, and I appreciate that in you. So you get that from your father. Anybody else here this morning?
I think one of the instructions that my dad left behind me involved my mother more than anybody else. My dad's eyes just lit up every single time my mom would come into a room. And he was always so kind to her, so mannerly, and you just knew that he thought that she was precious to him. And that made a huge impression on me, because as I got older, I learned that not all men are like that. And he even, when he died, he left love notes to my mom in file folders and in books that she read, and we were finding notes from him forever, it seems like. And it was really nice. He even, every morning he would play a song, You Are So Beautiful. He would turn on the tape deck beside the bed, and he would play, You Are So Beautiful to me. He was really a romantic.
I guess.
Yeah. So, and I learned lots of lessons. We always went to church. He always was faithful with all of that. We read our Bibles together all the time. And I remember in any house that we always had a little chest with an open Bible on it, and we would often just kneel at that little chest with the Bible on it and pray. And those are important lessons to learn.
Yes, they are. Well, those are wonderful stories, but I'm sure that a few of you may have a few other stories where your father may have been a little critical of you at times, when in your instruction, or maybe you thought that they were being a little bit too harsh. And faithful instruction is important, but we have to be careful on how we deliver it, either as a mother or a father, do we not? Otherwise they can feel like we're nagging at them. Or my son always says I micromanage him too much. And I always say he micromanages me too much. I think that's maybe because we're cut from the same cloth. But no praise, we need to learn how to give praise, and we need to learn how to give criticism from the aspect of love. Here are, unfortunately, some of the sad confessions that some fathers have had over the years. One father says, I took my children to school, but not to church. I taught them to drink, but not of the living water. I enrolled them in Little League, but not in Sunday school. I showed them how to fish, but not to be a fisher of men. I made the Lord's Day a holiday rather than a holy day. I taught them the church was full of hypocrites and made the greater hypocrite of them and me. I gave my child a color TV, but I provided them no Bible. I handed them the keys to the car, but did not give them the keys of the kingdom of God. I taught them how to make a living, but failed to bring them to Christ, who alone can make a life. Those are some of the regrets of parents, that they have with their children. So if you've had a father that instructed you kindly and instructed you in the ways of the Lord, be ever, ever grateful. And that brings us to our third and final one today. Be thankful for godly instruction from your father. What I mean is this. There were a godly illustration for your life, or a godly example for your life. 1 Corinthians, Paul said to the Corinthians who were his children in the faith, he said, follow my example as I follow the example of Christ. Notice Paul didn't say, do everything I do. Because we know Paul used to also say, the things I wish I did, I don't, and the things I don't wish I would do, I do. He said, do everything I do which is Christ-like. Because Paul wasn't perfect, and neither are we. There are a few things that I've done in my life that I don't want my children to do, to be like. And I'm sorry that when I've given them a bad example, you may have heard me say on many occasions that as much as I tried to mess my children up growing up, they turned out pretty good. And that's because I've also done some good things, some godly things, some Christ-like things, which I hope they will copy from me for life. If you'll indulge me in a little bit, I'd like to read a little of what my daughter wrote to me on her Father's Day card to me. I'm not going to read the one my granddaughter wrote to me too, or else I would just be a blubbering idiot, because she wrote me a book, literally, and wow, it just really touched my heart. But my daughter wrote, thank you for being the best dad. Dear, can you come read this for me? Serious, I can't read this. Can you read this for me? This is just my daughter's. Come on up here so you can get on the microphone.
Oh, I don't need the microphone.
No, but it does.
Oh, but I don't want to be on the phone.
You're on.
Thank you for being the best dad. The years have not always been easy. Gosh. But I've watched you give even when you have little. Hold your head up even when the weight on your shoulders is heavy, and love people no matter what. Thank you for taking every Tuesday call, answering every Bible question, and continuously showing me what it looks like to walk with Christ. I love you so much. I'll call you Tuesday. Love, Bina.
See, I think the most important thing that we can teach our children is to love God and to love His children as well. It all begins with love. There's a person that many of you might know. Her name is Nancy Newland. Okay? Nancy's maiden name was Anderson. And her father was our Sunday school director when my dad pastored the Nazarene church up in Auburn. His name was Nathan, but everybody called him Bud. He was a pillar of a man. Mom would confess to that. He was a pillar of a man, not only in the community, but in his family, as well as in our church. He was one of those men that when I grew up, I wanted to have some of his qualities. When Bud passed away, I learned from his children, who are all strong believers and followers of the Lord Jesus Christ, by the way, that every morning the family would sit down for breakfast and they would wait. The food would not even be put on the table until Dad got there. Because Dad was in the other room doing his prayers and devotions. And Dan, his oldest son, who ended up being a missionary to Africa for the Church of the Nazarene, Dan said, sometimes we would sit down and wait for 5 minutes. Sometimes it would be 30 to 45 minutes. But it was whatever it was for my dad to get the things right that he needed to be with the Lord for that day. That is just such a strong, godly influence. And that is the most important thing, I think, as parents and especially as fathers, that we need to leave to our children. We need to be a godly illustration of Christ. So thank God for all the fathers who have been godly illustrations, and godly examples to follow. For many years as a young man growing up, I held a huge chip on my shoulder. I ran from the Lord. That's why when you ask me, and I tell people I never, ever wanted to be a pastor, it was because my parents divorced when I was 16 and my dad was a pastor. And it just didn't make sense to me. And so for many years, I held a huge chip on my shoulder. And it wasn't until about the age of 30 I realized just how childish I was. And when I did, I sat down and I penned a letter to him of apology. In it, I apologized for holding him up to be the Son of God, as opposed to just being one of God's children. I apologize that I gave him such grief when all the time he was just trying to show me how a man of God should conduct himself. To this day, I regret some of the things I said to him, as I'm sure he regretted some of the things that he said to me. But in the end, I know that I would not be sitting before you today without his godly influence in my life. But know this as well. A person doesn't need to share another child's DNA to be a fatherly figure to them. I've been blessed with many such men. My grandfather, Orrin Decker, who taught me what real faith was all about. My dad, who showed me through life experience just how difficult it can be to follow after the Lord and be called to a higher calling. Bud Anderson, who showed me that Christ can and should be the foundational cornerstone of your life. To my late coach, Coach Land, who stepped in when my dad passed away and when I went off to college, and he encouraged me and mentored me in Christian values with a stubborn determination to see the job through if Christ has called you to do it. And to Joe Strommeyer, A lot of things have happened between Joe and myself, but the one thing that I'm ever, forever grateful for is that Joe was used by God to lead me back to that narrow path, to make me sensitive enough to hear that quiet, still voice of the Lord calling me. And I pray that I might be an influencer to you today, and have been over these many years. May you always see the love of God poured out through me unto you in a fatherly way.